69, when Vespasian became emperor, there was a rebellion in Jerusalem, in the land of Judea. This was a Roman province, which is modern-day Israel, Palestine, and parts of Jordan. And Vespasian was a military guy. He says, Titus, go get him. And so Titus sails out with 3 legions, and he will go back to Jerusalem and not only take the city back, we'll get to see he destroys the entire city, destroys the temple. Okay, that's the sack of the temple. It's in the year 70. Notice the first 2 lines once again, Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the people of Rome. That's what that means. Typically, these are words that are abbreviated with 4 letters that you may have seen in the city of Rome, SPQR. Usually you find them on manholes of sewage system, on the bus transportation, taxi cabs, fountains, anything that, public schools, anything that is public, anything that belongs to the city, still today is marked officially. The logo of Rome's municipality still has the 4 letters SPQR. They go back and they started using these words, 4 letters and words, to the Senate and the people of Rome in the year 509 BC. So it's been more than 25 centuries. And this brings us to another word which I find to be crucial in understanding Rome, and that's the word continuity. There's a certain aspect of continuity that traditions that manifest themselves throughout the entire history of Rome that is still here. SPQR are definitely one of them that the Romans pride themselves with. Notice the letters. Look at the letters carefully. Look at the N, look at the O. Can you see there's little holes inside those letters? Yeah. You see little holes? What does that tell you?
Metal.
That's right. So what's missing are the letters. The letters themselves were made of metal. They were made of bronze. Typically they were golden gilded, and they were embedded in the marble that was chiseled to host the letters. So we're seeing the negative, if you will. The letters, somebody took them. They thought they were golden. We don't know if they're not there. So that's why. This is a Corinthian capital. Okay. I just wanted to show you something. Where does it come from? What is it that inspired the Romans and the Greeks before them to create this image? Okay, what is this image of? I'll show you.
An elephant?
Fountain.
It's right here.
Torch.
It's the acanthus plant, which is a typical. Oops, sorry, I had to get one. Let's see, pick one nice. There we go. It's the acanthus leaf, and so this is what inspired. Okay, does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So, I find this to be crucial. I'll tell you why. Because we live in a high-tech world, and we look at nature and we take it for granted. The ancients, however, and we should take their example. The ancients believed that this is a miracle. The ancients believed that this that I'm holding right in my hands, this is something divine. This is something extremely beautiful. And when you see something beautiful, I know you know what I'm talking about. You're inspired. You feel something that you can't rationally explain. But there's something going on in your soul. Dostoevsky, very famous writer who wrote The Idiot, wrote that beauty will save the world. Well, I believe that. And I believe this is beautiful. And I believe a flower is beautiful, just like a parrot or any other bird. And that's exactly what inspired the ancients, to create beauty. It came from nature, which is not man-made. They couldn't explain it, and therefore it was divine for them. So creating that link, and perhaps taking examples for that, we could probably start looking at something like this, as simple as it may be, as something beautiful, divine, perfect, something of a miracle. For those of you that wish to drink water, on the left side there is a drinking fountain. This is perfectly safe. Where does it go? Right into the foundations of the arch. You can see the underlying foundations underneath the arch. Do you see that? That's a poured layers and layers of concrete foundation which should have been underground. In fact, you can still see the marks of the wooden poles that held the foundation together. How do you explain that? So this is where I talk to you about a very important aspect of Rome, and it's called the lasagna effect. Okay, Rome is like a lasagna. Layer on layer on layer. Why? Because if you don't have a bulldozer or machines to tear down a building, what you would typically do is leave the building where it is, bury it, and build another one over it, using that as foundations. In other words, this street is a street of the 1st century before Christ, whereas the arch was built in 73 AD, so 150 years later, and therefore there was another street built over this one. This one was buried. Let's get a little closer so we can see. Bacaboboni in the very late 1800s to reveal this street and to figure out the change in the topography in the street. Okay? Now, remember we talked about the arch? Jerusalem? Destroyed. The temple? Destroyed. The Romans will take from the temple of Jerusalem the gold and the spoils of war will be brought to Rome. We have a bas-relief, if you come completely in the shade over here behind me, stand behind me and look at the bas-relief in that direction. And this is a very important historical relief where you see the Romans carrying the great menorah from the Jewish temple, the second temple of Jerusalem. It wasn't the temple of Solomon because it had already been destroyed by the Babylonians. This was a rebuilt temple, the one that Jesus saw, and it was never rebuilt. Once the Romans destroyed it in the year 70, the only fragment of the temple, you might know this, that survives is the western wall, also known as the Wailing Wall. But the temple was destroyed, and the Romans brought back anything that was precious. The great menorah, we know from the Bible, was made out of one solid piece of gold. It was very big, that's the size. That's not a menorah, that's the menorah. It's the candle holder with 7 branches. Okay? Similar to the Hanukkah menorah, which is 9 branches, which is used during Hanukkah in December, which Americans usually see because they. This is the true menorah. And further to the right, the shofars are the long horns they're carrying on their shoulders. Also, what seems to be sort of a box. Some have argued that could be the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah, I've talked to Indiana Jones about this, who says it's amazing, people. You're seeing the oldest image of the menorah. Even the Jews don't have such an image. They know what it looks like. Now, of course, where are these? My son is 13. We should get them married. Okay? So, your life expectancy was a third of what it is now. Ladies, you would live 28, 29 years on the average. Childbirth kept it very low. Okay? And gentlemen, you would live into your maybe mid-40s at the most, on the average. There are exceptions, of course. So if you live to be 28, you better have children at 14. That's half your life right there. You got to see them grow. At least you have to see them grow to adulthood. And adulthood in the ancient world is puberty, which is great. And some of you parents know what I'm talking about, right? In the ancient world, there were no teenagers. You didn't have to deal with them. You know what I'm saying? But all of you know that today we have to shift adulthood about 10 years later. Right? People, it's getting into their 30s. Unfortunately. I know. I got 6 kids myself. And, I was too young when I started. And anyways, so you don't fall in love and marry. That's not how it works. Did you marry the person you fell in love with? Yeah, okay. Well, okay.
We just made a baby.
Okay, so that's the ancient world.
We do as the
That's the ancient world. That's right. You don't marry the person you fall in love with. You fall in love with the person you eventually make a baby with or marry, right? That's how it works. The other time, the other way around. And you wouldn't decide. Your parents would say, you go with her, you go with him, because it's a merger. Right? Now you're selling cabbage and fish. The scope of your business is broad. You see what I'm trying to say here? Making things really simple. But that's how these villages become interunited and interdependent. Now I have allies on that hill. This is neutral territory, but it won't be for long because the marketplace will be the place where everybody meets, and it's going to become the town center. So what used to be nobody's land, neutral, is now everybody's land, still neutral. Right? So the marketplace needs to be regulated. Who's going to make the rules? It's going to be the elders, the clan leaders of the villages. You know what the word elder is in Latin? Senex. That's where the word senate comes from. So the senators get together to dictate the rules. We need one more thing, don't we? We got commerce, we got the marketplace, we have the Senate, we have a government administration. We're missing one last thing. How do we tie up all these people to be one people? It's that binding. To tie up together in Latin is religo. Religo. That's where the word religion comes from. So religion is to tie up the people under one higher common authority. And that common authority that gives us life, which shines over everyone no matter where you're from, what language you speak, or what your color is the sun. And when it rains, it reigned over your head as it did mine yesterday, the day before, right? So nature, the sun, the moon, the stars, they are the gods. Myths appear to explain it all, and so we need to build temples to establish the pax deorum, the peace with the gods. We want to be at peace with the gods because they have the power. And they are forever. We are mortal, they're not. That's the main difference. Okay? So the temples appear, the government buildings appear, and the shopping centers and department stores. This is where the Macy's and the Nordstroms were. This is where the Senate, the White House, Congress, and the Supreme Court were. And this is where the temples were for the worshiping of the gods. Nobody lived here. This was not a residential area. If you've ever been to DC, it's very similar to the mall. Lincoln Memorial, the White House, the Congress, the Supreme Court, the Smithsonian Institution, all the different memorials like Triumphal Arches here were the memorials to the wars. We have all kinds of war memorials in DC in that area, right? Vietnam, and whatever. Right? So that's what this was. It was a monumental area of the city which expressed and manifested the glory of the empire and of the emperor and of the people of Rome, the Senate and the people. One of these buildings happens to be the last one was built, huge. Take a look at this. We're only seeing about a fourth of the building left. This was the Supreme Court of the ancient world. Built in 315, started by the Emperor Maxentius, completed by the Emperor Constantine. It was known as the Basilica Constantini, or Maxenti et Constantine, the Basilica of Maxentius and Constantine, because it was started by Maxentius and then completed by Constantine. The word basilica, do not be deceived, it doesn't mean church. When you hear basilica, you think of a church, not necessarily. It's an architectural term. And in this case, this is a basilica, which was, of course, never a church. It was a government institution. Enormous. Let's move on.